Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com and follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. And of course, on our YouTube channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and check off the notification bell for weekly videos. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC. For more information and on how they can assist you in your filmmaking needs, go to owcdigital.com. This week, I'm joined by Cirina Catania, one of the co-founders of the Sundance Film Festival, a tech evangelist for various companies, and the director of the upcoming feature documentary, The Purple Heart. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good, thanks. So I guess the one thing I do want to start with is tell me about Sundance and how that sort of came to be.
I think Sundance, actually, I didn't even put that on my resume for so many years
Mm-hmm.
because it's for me, it's in the past, but I think Sundance is an example of what can happen when you say yes and when
Mm-hmm.
you decide you want to do something, and no matter what other people tell you about how it can't be done, you just go ahead and you do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it was John Earl, who was head of the Film Commission. I, at the time, was associate director of the Utah Film Commission. And Sterling Van Wagenen, who was a friend of ours, who was a film buff and an award winning filmmaker. And between John and Sterling and I, we were trying to figure out how to bring more films to Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And, the governor had given us a mandate. We need more films. We need more revenue from the filmmaking community.
Mm-hmm.
And we just said, well, let's have a film festival.
Yeah.
And John and Sterling were more involved in the actual operations and on the front lines. I stayed behind pretty much the first year to make sure everything at the Film Commission was going okay. And then the second year became the executive director and really took over the overall operations. And it was, I have to say, probably the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
But we screened over 64 films just from one area of the program alone, and we brought Jimmy Stewart and Frank Capra in, and all these stars and all these famous filmmakers, and all of a sudden it started to create some momentum. And we had gone into debt the first year, but the second
Mm-hmm.
year we actually made a small profit. So then we were able to continue.
Now, my wife used to work at TIFF, so I know how hard the work is for a festival, especially the week before, during, and then afterwards. It's just a collapse and relax.
I have to tell
Um,
you, when it was over,
yeah,
I went home, I plopped into bed literally the day after
yeah,
the festival, and we were all sort of wrapping everything up. And I said, I got to go take a nap. So I went home, I laid down in bed, and the staff was trying to call me. They
yeah.
couldn't reach me. The phone was right by my head, and I was so tired that I wasn't answering, and they got worried, and they sent somebody knocking on the door to make sure that I was still alive. And
Wow,
yes, I'm still alive.
they didn't break the door down and
They had to
rush
knock
in.
pretty hard. I was
Yeah,
upstairs all the way at the other end. I did not hear that phone ringing right by my head,
wow.
but it was worth it. It was really worth it.
And is there something, because there's a lot of young filmmakers who will watch this, is there something that some advice you can give them in terms of because I guess like how festivals work and what the best way to approach your submissions for festivals, anything like that?
Hmm. Well, the whole festival circuit is changing with COVID the last
Yeah.
couple of years. A lot of it has been virtual. And I think there's pluses and negatives to that. The pluses are that it's not as expensive
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have to necessarily travel to the festival. You don't have to fly to Berlin. You don't have to fly to Utah or drive across country to get there. And the whole way to submit a film is really changing. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just only about festivals now. I think festivals are still pertinent, they're still valuable, but that goes into the overall distribution plan of your film. You have to look
Mm-hmm.
at your film, who's going to want to see it, who you need to network with, and will this festival help you get there? So, a lot of people will try to get an in to get
Mm-hmm.
their film in, but I think if you push the programmers to do that. They're going to be reticent because they have to be very careful and remain ethical.
Yeah.
So I would say just go through the channels, and there's a lot that you need to do to get your film ready to submit. So before you even start submitting, you have to figure out not just, is the film finished and do I have a DCP if I need it, or is my digital copy good enough, and how's the sound and how's the picture, but it's more of, by the time you get to the festival, you have to have all of your marketing materials lined up, and you have to have that pitch down. You know, what's your two-liner? I've always felt like the two-liner was one of the hardest things for filmmakers to come to. Just on The Purple Heart, that film, I've been following this wounded Marine Chianti story for 5 years, and over the last 5 years, the pitch for the film has completely changed. And now I'm working out a whole new marketing and sales strategy for the film, because when he didn't get into the Paralympics, the film went from being a film about a wounded warrior surviving everything, trying to get into the Paralympics, and I followed him around to every track meet. And then at literally the last track meet, he didn't make it, just by a split second.
Wow.
And he was devastated. And so, I mean, he didn't even want to talk. I have a shot of him way off in the distance, sitting dejectedly against a wall. Well, he called me 2 weeks later and said, I'm going to start climbing mountains. I said, really? He said, yeah, the romp for prosthetics and the Bob Woodruff Foundation and all these charities need help raising money. So he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to start, which is one of the highest mountains in the world.
That's an interesting starting point.
Right. So there's another pivot, right? So then it went from trying to get on the Paralympics team to now this amazing guy conquering all odds, climbing mountains, and in the middle there's all kinds of plot points. But then it pivoted again because he left his job at the FBI. He retired from the military, obviously, left his job at the FBI, and now he's a college student.
Oh, wow. What's he studying?
He wants to be a physical therapist.
Oh,
So I'm telling you these stories because this is an example of how, as a filmmaker, producer, director, marketer, you have to think about, what do you want to say with your film? And it affects everything. It affects the cut. It affects your pitch deck. It affects how you talk about your film. And you have to consider all of that. When I was working in marketing at the studio, and then later on in production on a lot of these big films I've worked on, it was the same problem. So you're not alone. Even if you're a single person running around with your camera, following somebody amazing, documenting their story, you still have to figure out how to tell that story. And until you figure that out, you should not go out into the world with it. There was a lot of very early publicity about the Chianti story movie, but now it's changed and it's pivoted, not just because of what was happening with him, but also something else we all need to think about. What's happening in the world? You know, what's happening right now with Afghanistan and with the veterans and with the Gold Star families and with everyone back in the United States? And how does his story resonate? Not just resonate, but what do I want to say about the world and him? I don't want to make a political movie, on the other hand. But then somebody asked me the one question that got to the core of what it's all about. And they said, why are you spending all this time and money making this movie? What about this person really resonates with you? And I thought about it, and all of a sudden, from a very deep place came this thought. I'm looking for my father, who was a wounded Army. He was a lieutenant. When he died, he was a colonel in the Army. But he survived Omaha Beach. He survived the Battle of Chosin. He walked for 3 days with a bullet lodged against his jugular to get down the mountain and bring all the troops down, with gunfire going off everywhere. And then he went to Vietnam. So personally, for me, getting to know Chianti is helping me to get to know who my father was. Wow. And so that's all part of the film now, too. So it's two men, two generations, focusing on Chianti, but also bringing in the who, what, when, where, and why. And talking about the aftermath of coming home from a terrible war like Iraq and Afghanistan, and how do you live your life. So to all the filmmakers out there, think about that. Think about, get to the core. Ask yourself that one question: why am I doing this? And then you'll figure out where the heartbeat is. And once you figure out where the heartbeat is, then you'll know how to communicate that to the world. You know?
So how did this project start, The Purple Heart? Like, how did you discover them? How did you get it going?
This is the way the universe brings you things, right? I was volunteering. I lived in LA at the time, and I was coming down to San Diego a lot and in the environs around here, volunteering to shoot video and stills for a charity, a nonprofit called Furnishing Hope. And what they do is a lot of the wounded servicemen and women spend years in the hospital, and then they come out and they're suffering from depression and PTSD. And the military gives them money for apartments, but it doesn't give them enough money to furnish those apartments. So Furnishing Hope is a company that provides furniture and everything that someone needs to walk into their new home and feel like they're at home. And it's also handicap accessible. So I was doing that, and Chianti was one of those people.
Okay.
So Chianti and I together are giving back to the community. The film is a nonprofit film, and we're going to share the proceeds with ROMP, with the Bob Woodruff Foundation, with Simplify, and with Homes for Our Troops. They're building Chianti a home that he's going to move into this fall. So
How do you, because it is such a delicate situation when you're talking to your subjects, or you know, like, especially something if someone's suffering from PTSD. So how do you find that balance where you can push them in an interview or get them to reveal stuff, but you don't want to cause mental harm on them or push them too far? How do you find that balance?
That's a really good question, and it's the
Thank you.
one thing. No, it's really, that is a very important question, and it's actually something that resonates with me because I'm not one of these. Even though I do investigative journalism, I have a little bit of a different approach. I couldn't be following somebody down the street and shouting at them with the microphone in my hand. That's not me. That would not be something that I would want to do. That wouldn't be real. My theory is, when you find somebody that you want to interview, you get to know them and you tell them why you want to interview them or why you want to make a film about them. And if they say no, you have to honor that. That's their life. Or if somebody in the field says, no, I don't want to be on camera, I always apologize. I say, okay, well, think about it. I'll come back to you in a few hours or a few days or a few months and we can talk again, but I absolutely respect your opinion. Someone like Chianti, who is very quiet by nature. So as a documentary filmmaker, you want to talk to him and you want to bring out the emotional beats behind all that stoicism, right? But it's hard. It's hard. So you just have to be gentle with people. That's my approach. You have to respect them. You have to show love for them. You have to be gentle. You have to tell them why you need what you need. And then you see. And then sometimes you have to go back 2 or 3 times to do the interview until they're really comfortable with you. The other thing about interviewing somebody, that these are not actors. When you're working on documentary films, these are not actors. So you might be shooting B-roll. You might be asking them to go somewhere or do something so you can shoot it. I try, when I'm doing a sit-down interview, to not have anybody else in the room except for the very essential people. If I'm shooting it myself, it may be harder, but it's great because then I tell them, just look at me. Don't think about the camera. This is a conversation. I'm going to edit it. So, and if I ask you anything uncomfortable, feel free to say no. If I have a camera operator or a sound person or somebody logging, like if we're using Lumberjack and we've got somebody logging, I ask those people to please not make eye contact with the person I'm interviewing so that we can create a little bubble around the two of us. And then they sometimes forget. You know, they get into the conversation and they forget. And that's when you get the real moments. There's another rule of thumb when I'm directing non-scripted in the field, I always ask my camera operators to please don't interrupt me, even if a plane goes by or a train goes by or something happens and you can see that you're going to need to do it over again. First of all, I've got a pretty keen eye and I know what's happening, but I let the person finish their sentence, finish their thought. And then I ask them again and I'll say, look, I'm really sorry, but we had an airplane go by. I'm not sure about the sound. Do you mind repeating that again? And if a camera operator has a problem, even if their battery goes dead, I will ask them to touch me on my back or my shoulder. Then I know, I don't even have to turn around. I know that they need me. And we finish that thought. And then I cut and then I talk to them about what happened and we fix it and then we keep moving on. That way, the person that you're interviewing still maintains the train of thought, still maintains that emotional roller coaster that you're on with them. So that's just a couple of things that I do in the field.
And you're currently in post right now. So how are you going to mold this? Because it was 5 years of filming and now you've got hundreds of hours,
Yeah.
if not
Yeah.
thousands.
Yeah.
How do you think, how have you started that process of chipping away at it?
Well, and in the middle of all of it, a lot of people are aware that we were hacked. I was working on a very large-scale investigative journalism project, and we got hacked, and I lost 250 terabytes of material. All of the Chianti footage to date and all of the administrative files and everything were in the middle of all of that. It took a couple of years and we got about 85% of it back.
Yeah.
Thank God. So it came back without metadata.
Ooh.
There was no metadata in the media. So no date of filming, no date of, when the media was first created, no title, and no structure at the Finder level for anything.
Yeah. Wow.
So there were millions of files all mixed up together that just had numbers on them. So when you ask about organizing, in this case, what I personally had to do when the material started coming back was open every single file to see what was in it. That was before Kino was invented.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love Kino because now I can open up batches of files and Kino will show me what's in it. It's very sad when you see a .mov file that was corrupted and you can't open it and it's 2.5 gigs. There's something wonderful on there. You can't see it. But I physically organize at the Finder level, and I have an assistant editor coming in now helping me to do that. So we're locating all of the files and moving them into a structure that I've developed, Act 1 through 6, which is more of a television structure. And so we're working for that script that is being written about the film. So he's moving stuff into at the Finder level. The next step is to bring an assistant editor to work in Final Cut, and we will import all of the organized material by act into Final Cut. And then from there, I'll export an XML into Builder.
Yeah.
And I will build the story using Builder. And then, so the A-roll cut, the story cut will be in there. And then we export it back to Final Cut, open it up in Final Cut. And from there, we'll start building the B-roll. Now, this is a huge endeavor because it's a 1-hour film. So if it's easy if it's 3, 4, 5 minutes. Don't have to worry about that. Like if I'm cutting sound bites for some of the OWC interviews or something, that's different. But on a 1-hour film, we will probably structure it so that we cut by Act 1 and 2 together, and then 3 and 4 together, and then 5 and 6 together, and then marry all of that as we get further along. But the assistant editor is using a combination of Kino to find the stuff, which I've done pretty much all of that. He's organizing it at the Finder level by act, and then we bring all of that into Final Cut, and then immediately start using Builder to build the story, and then Final Cut and B-roll to finish it.
And what's Kino? Like Kino is?
Kino, Kyno. I really encourage everyone to Google it. It literally it's a way of finding your media. So, like if you've ever used Lightroom and you're looking at a grid,
Yeah.
it's very similar to that, only it deals with the media. So you can see in a grid everything that you have on that particular drive or in that section of the drive. And then you can move things around, you can rename them, but it helps you find and organize before you
Okay.
actually start cutting. That's the other thing. Please get your projects organized before you start cutting.
And it helps, but it sounded like it also helped it with corrupted files, or
If the file's corrupted, no, Kino
no?
can't open it.
Okay.
I've tried everything with the QuickTime files, the .mov files. If they're corrupted, as of right now, I've tried every possible way to recover them, and it's sad, but I haven't gotten rid of them. They're off on another drive, labeled ng.mov, and at some point in the future, somebody will really invent something that can recreate that. Although some of the stuff we found, like there's the stuff that I shot at one of the tracks at UCSD, I shot him working out. Some of those files came back with music on them that had nothing to do with what I was shooting. So that's what happens when the beginning and end of every drive, the address track on the beginning and the end was damaged.
Wow.
Hey, at least we got it back. Now we've got Steve Carson sitting there organizing at the Finder level, and the assistant editor who works in Final Cut will come in, and I'll work with them to get that organized, and we're well on our way.
Wow.
But that's just part of it. The cut's only part of it, right?
Yeah. Now I have one last question that I ask everyone in the interview. We've been stuck in this pandemic for over a year now. And in that time, a lot of people have turned to streaming services for entertainment.
Oh,
Is there a
yeah.
show or a movie you discovered over the past year that people should check out?
Oh my gosh, I think I've watched everything I could possibly watch on Netflix and Amazon. But I'll tell you what I enjoyed the most is I was able to watch every single movie that was available to watch during Sundance
Mm-hmm.
because I'm pressed too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I had access to all the Sundance films, and then I had access to all the Berlinale films. And months later, after watching all those movies, there's a couple that really stick out. And one of them was Coda,
Okay.
about a family where everyone is deaf except for one person in the family. And it got picked up immediately after Sundance. And the other one was a documentary called Summer of Soul, which is about a parallel festival of all African American music that was happening as almost as a sidebar to Woodstock
Oh,
at the same time. And this was in Harlem. And there were thousands and thousands of people there, but for years, no one ever really was able to access the footage that was shot. And so now it has come out as a film, and it's fascinating to watch.
Well, thank you
But
so
then
much.
Chicago Med, what can I say?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview. And that's it for this week, guys. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com for our latest courses. And also subscribe to our Twitter at filmmaker_u. I want to thank you again for joining us. And of course, our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.